Hi, everyone. My name is Quinn Burke, and I'm the Director of Computational Thinking Research here at Digital Promise. Thanks for joining us today as we talk about developing district-wide inclusive computational thinking pathways with three esteemed district leaders talking about the work that they have been doing within their own districts around computational thinking and computer science education that stretches across kindergarten through 12th grade. As you see from the slide, take a minute to punch into the chat. Where are you located? Tell us about your role. And if you would, tell us a bit about what you're excited to learn about today. We have a generous Q&A session here over the second half of this webinar. And it's going to be really important to get a sense of who you are, why you're here, and whether you have been doing some work in this regard or are interested in doing some work in this regard. So let me move forward right now to our agenda for today. We are knee-deep in welcomes and introductions. I'm going to talk a little bit about the overall course that we are presenting today. Then we are going to delve into some district stories with our district leaders. And then we are going to have some general Q&As with the district partners. We actually aren't going to go with breakout rooms, though. We're going to stay as a wider group, and then we're going to have some closing remarks and any further Q&A as our fifth and final point for today. Let me pull back for a minute. And before I start talking about Infosys and our relationship with Infosys, I'd like to actually introduce all three of our panelists. We have Adam Kurth from Iowa City School District. We have Brooke Morgan from Talladega County Schools, and we have Julio Vazquez from North Salem Schools. We are very privileged to have all of them here with us today, and you're going to hear from each of them shortly. We could go to the next slide. Just as a precursor, this work has been sponsored from the Infosys Foundation. Infosys has been working with Digital Promise and has been a leader around computer science education in order to support district leaders around designing inclusive computing pathways to ensure all students have access to high quality computer science learning. This is our first foray working with Infosys specifically around district-facing computer science pathways. And districts are welcome to get on with this course with Infosys. It is available on demand, free of charge, on the Pathfinders Online Institute. We have a total of 9 modules that we're going to talk a little bit more about the process of actually creating pathways within one's district to ensure all students are getting equitable access. Some of you are probably who are already on the webinar right now are some familiar with Infosys and Pathfinders. To date, they've had, as indicated here, over 16,000 users and over 1,600, hours of available content. So we do welcome you to get on there, and specifically, of course, to our modules, but the broader range of tools and resources available. We can go to the next slide for a moment. Just to talk a little bit about Digital Promise. Many of you know us and I think have joined us on prior webinars, but we are a global nonprofit working at what we say the intersections to expand opportunities for a broader range of learners. Our work is in K through 12 schooling primarily, but we do work with adult education, alternative education environments as well. And we, of course, encourage you to come by our website to learn about some of our offerings and our work, specifically around CT and some of the broader initiatives we've been part of. I'm going to go to one more slide here. And that is about the CT Pathways Initiative. This work began approximately 4 years ago. And at this point in time, we see in states across the country, all 50 states have adopted CS standards to date, which has been an incredible improvement in the last 5 years. But one of the things we're seeing right now is that even though all these states have computer science standards available, what we are lacking is districts picking up these standards and actually creating not just some CS and CT offerings, but CS and CT offerings for all of their students and all of their schools. So our work here has relied on the 3 Cs. We believe that this work needs to be consistent. If you offer it in one school, you need to offer it in another school. And it needs to be cumulative. It needs to build across grade bands. It needs to move from elementary into middle and then into high school and build upon prior offerings so students are actually making a trajectory forward. And last, and what our panelists are going to talk about a bit as they talk about their own pathways, it needs to be competency focused. It's not enough to simply say coding or CS or even more generally computational thinking. We need to delve down and actually look at things like algorithms and working with data. And by focusing on competencies, we focus on integration and figuring out where these things can be integrated into existing subject matter, which especially matters on the K-8 level, as we'll learn from our district partners. There are 9 modules, if we go to the next slide, that can present our course, beginning with how to actually go through the course successfully and defining what we mean by computational thinking, all the way into implementing and revising your pathway. One of the things we're proud about our Infosys course is that this was a course that was developed alongside our district partners. So you'll see that the districts are the ones who are going to be leading these respective modules, not representative simply from Digital Promise. So you'll be getting it from the horse's mouth, for lack of a better phrasing here, and understanding from their perspective how these different modules work and how they can be applied to your own school district. Well, with that, I'm going to stop and actually make some introductions and hear about our districts themselves. As I say, we have Brooke Morgan, Coordinator of Innovative Learning from Talladega County Schools in Alabama. Adam Kurth, who directs Technology and Innovation from Iowa City Community School District. And Julio Vazquez, who directs Technology and Innovation in North Salem School District up in New York. Welcome to all 3 of them, and very glad to have you here with us today. We're going to kind of open this up now to some general questions and getting a sense of your work in this regard. First and foremost, as we kind of talk about this work, can you tell us a bit about your district and the students that you're serving? And I think we've got Brooke here, but Brooke, I'm going to ask you to rewind and come back to us because I think we got you on mute for a second.
Yes, sir. I'm Brooke Morgan from Talladega County Schools in Alabama. And Talladega County is a very rural school district. We have a little over 7,000 students. And we are a high poverty district. And that was one reason we wanted to have our pathway district-wide, is so that all students in our schools would be exposed to that curriculum and not just certain students. So we really targeted our students in high poverty and female students, because when we started our work, we realized that the courses we did offer primarily were being taken by male students.
Great. Thanks, Brooke. Adam and Julio, I'm going to ask you especially about the pathway development, but can you just give us a quick overview of your role, how you bung at each of the districts, and, just a brief background of the schools and the students you serve?
Yeah, so I'm Director of Technology and Innovation here, and as part of that, I oversee instructional technology, a few other things, but also computer science has fallen under my purview. And we are a college town district, about 15,000 students. We include the University of Iowa within our footprint, and for a long time operated as a pretty traditional progressive college town that was very traditionalistic in terms of education. We've been very fast growing, and so we've seen the need to diversify our approach to how we approach student learning, really grow within the last 10-15 years. So trying to address things like computational thinking within our classroom explicitly in a way that's equitable has been really crucial.
Great. Thanks, Adam.
Hello, Quinn and everyone. So my name is Julio Vazquez. I'm the Director of Instruction and Human Resources for the North Salem Central School District. Our district is pretty small. We have less than 1,000 students in the district, about 73% white, 18% Hispanic, Latinx, 3% Asian, 2% African American, and 4% multiracial. Similar to my colleagues, we really wanted to have a pathway for our students that culminated in AP computer science courses, also multimedia and the use of Python. And we're looking to develop some cybersecurity courses for our students at the high school level. But we know that we weren't going to be able to do that unless we had a pathway that began in kindergarten and that really taught our students how to implement computational thinking. And we really went down that path because it was something that was all our teachers would be able to do K through 12 across all subject areas. And so happy to say that we've been able to build that pathway for our teachers.
And Julio, I'm going to stay with that for a minute. I mean, you did have some high school offerings then at the starting point, but then recognized collectively that these just weren't getting populated. And was that sort of the central impetus for your own pathway in North Salem?
Yes, we began this work with computational thinking back in 2017 with Computer Science for All. And at that time, we really had only about 7 white male students enrolled in our AP Computer Science courses. So over the years, and because of our partnership with Digital Promise, and we've been able to change that a lot to now we have 75 students enrolled in our computer science courses, Python and multimedia. And that's a pool of students that is reflective of the diversity in our district. So that was a huge success for us.
Adam, let me ask you, I mean, just on off of what Julio had talked about with Iowa City, you had some CS offerings, you had some coding activities. What was sort of the impetus for the pathway for you and the district more broadly?
Yeah, so the big thing for us, and I think it's maybe common across a lot of districts, is we had some computer science offerings at the secondary level. We had some real, what I would call like pockets of excellence at the elementary and junior high levels, where we had teachers doing really innovative, interesting things. We had some schools that kind of across grade levels or the whole school were doing, again, interesting and innovative things. But it wasn't systematic, and it wasn't something that was impacting our students equitably kind of across the district. And so we tended to see a lot of those opportunities being afforded to students who are in schools with, in higher SES schools, really. And that created a real concern for us. So we knew that we needed to implement something that was going to provide computational thinking and computer science education from an early age so that we could truly address disproportionality in our secondary course enrollments by providing both skills and background and comfort with and building interest in computer science and CT. So we needed something that was going to reach all of our students from kindergarten on up in such a way as, we hope, and, still playing out, but we hope will, ultimately provide all of our students with a high quality background in this area, in a way that'll provide them more opportunities, but also give them, cross-curricular benefits. We really have seen that as something that motivates our work.
Right. Brooke, I'm going to kind of go over to you here for a minute because you talked about Talladega. You talked about the need to, especially with looking at female enrollment in some of these courses. We hear more about pathways, not simply in CS and CT, but doing pathways work is not easy. Most districts seem to have some smattering of offerings, as Adam just and Julio referenced as well. How did Talladega kind of make the start in designing its pathway? What was that process like?
So we really wanted to make sure that this was an initiative that was district-wide, that we embedded these practices and competencies within all content areas and all grade areas, so that schools who may not have standalone courses would still, the teachers would have the skills necessary to embed that into their current curriculum. And so that was kind of our mindset going into it. We wanted to make sure that all grade levels and all schools were represented in our team that actually designed these pathways. And then we actually used those same teacher leaders and tech coaches to do the training at the schools on the pathways once it was developed. And that has been very successful for us. It's been a language that we speak district-wide in all of our schools. And our students understand that they are using different types of computational thinking to solve problems in all content areas, not just what you would normally see in computer science or math and science, but also in ELA and in social studies classrooms as well.
Great, great. Julio, how about the design in North Salem?
With our work, I thought one of the things that was key was to make or have an elementary team and a middle school, high school team that was composed of teachers. So they functioned as leaders with the administration in developing the design of our competency map. And now we're using or leveraging that teacher leadership so that we have professional development days set aside so they can help their colleagues in the understanding of how to integrate computational thinking into the various subject areas. So that's a model that has worked for us in developing our competency pathway.
So Julio, I'm going to stay with you for a minute here. Module 4 is all about developing leadership. You talked about tapping teachers. Where did you find the teachers? Were these folks that you had already been in touch with? Did you put a wider call out? Combination of both?
Well, beginning with our work in 2017 with Computer Science for All and a grant that we had with NYU, we had a number of teachers, mainly from our math and science departments to begin with, but then we expanded that to our library media specialist. So that was the initial team. And then after training that we had with through Digital Promise, we were able to include some teachers who are generalist and also included the arts, ELA, and social studies. So really initially beginning to build the capacity of teachers and understanding what computational thinking was, and then enlisting their support to then turnkey and help their colleagues understand what the integration looks like.
That's great. And I'm going to bounce over to you on that. I mean, what was it like trying to bring people to the table? Just as a note, and we had started working together pre-COVID. So I of course want to get a sense of how that went in Iowa City, but I also know, especially we're still in a time right now where teachers are feeling overwhelmed and tired. So any thoughts you also have about how you do this nowadays in terms of getting people on board would be most welcome.
Yeah, so in terms of initially getting people on board, for us, at least at the top levels of the district, getting leaders on board was fairly easy because it was easy to make a case for this as an important issue. It's something that we were hearing from our community. We were hearing from industry groups, literally had an entire industry group that was created to focus on how we could do work in schools to generate more graduates who were interested in and qualified for these types of fields. So at the top level, it was pretty easy to get support. In terms of building leaders, curricular leaders, teachers involved, we did a lot of work with one-on-one meetings with some of our key curricular leaders. We had focus groups with teachers. We got teachers involved in pilot work early on. And that's something that, is really helpful to us in terms of both, deliberately scaling what we were doing, but also tweaking what we were doing along the way. And to your second question, Quinn, COVID really, created a big challenge for all of us, right? Across so many domains. But one of the big areas of challenge was figuring out how to recalibrate our scale up. And one of the things that I think that we've really tried to do is to be deliberate about refocusing our work in this area. And if anything, try to use some of the challenges that we faced during COVID as opportunities. So we're really trying to look at how we can leverage whether it's remote learning, whether it's micro credentials that can be delivered asynchronously and kind of taken and engaged with asynchronously on the part of teachers for professional development. We're looking at opportunities to revisit the way that we're integrating CT into some of our curricular areas. A lot of those, were in some ways enabled by kind of a pause during COVID. It's without a doubt that last year more than this year, but even continuing, it's difficult to get people to buy into things like summer training sessions or anything that's going to go beyond kind of what they're already doing. Last year in particular, that was overwhelming for people. And so again, we're looking for ways that we can work with our teachers, ways that we can work with our building leaders, and also ways that we can engage the community that maybe rely on a little less traditional methods or a little more convenient to engage with than some of our approaches before the pandemic.
Right. That's really helpful, Adam. Kind of thinking about sort of post-COVID drafting pathways, keeping momentum going, and I'd like to get all three opinions, but Brooke, I'd like to go to you. How have you been able to kind of continue to move things forward in Talladega and keep momentum going on this? Especially, and I know this because Brooke's talked about it, but I think all districts have felt this with some of the big turnover, new teachers coming in, some more experienced teachers sometimes retiring. Talk a little bit about the process, Brooke, of kind of making sure this initiative doesn't get lost among the many that schools have to juggle all the time.
Right. Well, luckily, 14 of our 17 schools are STEM certified schools. And so part of being a STEM certified school, we have to recertify every 3 years. And so that has really helped us keep the work alive, because teachers and administrators know that we have to provide evidence so that we can maintain our STEM certifications. And part of that is using our pathway, because it is so heavy in STEM. And, I know we've talked before about the high rate of teacher turnover we've had, mostly due to COVID and a teacher shortage. And we are having to sometimes hire teachers who don't yet have their teaching certificates. And so one thing that we're doing is a lot of refresher training. And we still have our identified teacher leaders in all the schools. We pull them in, we give them a refresher, they go back to their schools, do turnaround training, and just trying to keep the pathway in the forefront. Anytime our instructional coaches are planning with teachers and coaching them, they pull out that as a guide to help them with lesson plans. So it's really just keeping the conversation alive, with our administrators and with our instructional coaches and our teacher leaders who are involved in that work.
That's great. Julio, keeping momentum going in North Salem?
So I would say I definitely agree with Brooke. You have to have the pathway as an anchor for the work that you're doing and continually drive everything back to that pathway. So for us, the focus is computational thinking with our work. And with that, I think it's really about your approach with it. You're not positioning it as something separate from what teachers are doing. Computational thinking is our skills and practices that really help the students in those teachers' classes be better problem solvers and thinkers. So as you're developing these skills, it's easier for teachers to really buy into that work in that way. Fortunately, because we're a smaller school district, we don't have the turnaround that other districts are experiencing. So really for us, it's just been about deepening those practices with teachers and prioritizing this work above other district work, and throughout the year setting a schedule where this is the focus of our professional development, whether it's a superintendent conference day or a faculty meeting, and giving the teachers the time to really engage with that work. So making space and really prioritizing has allowed us to be successful.
That's great. Well, listen, I kind of want to broaden this out. I think there's some questions that we've kind of put together for each of you that we wanted to get thoughts on. But I also want folks to include, we have a modest but mighty group of attendees here. So please do put those questions you have for Julio, for Brooke, for Adam in the chat. There's one question I kind of want to kick off with, and I think it's a question that's relevant for everyone. When you form teams to do this work, because it's work that requires teams, did you specifically try to pull teachers with experience doing technology, computational thinking, even computer science education, or was it a mixed bag in terms of how you put your own teams together? You've talked a little bit about that, but I'd like to get a specific sense of how you found those teachers and what their backgrounds were. And I'll open that up for any of our three panelists.
I'll jump in on that one first, because we were pretty deliberate from the start as we started to identify teachers for pilot implementations, that we didn't want to only identify teachers who are, viewed as like, all-stars in this area already, or the ones who everyone would look at as already doing those things and doing them really well, for a couple of reasons. One, what we were asking them to do wasn't necessarily what some of those teachers might have already been doing. But the much bigger reason was that we wanted to make sure that we had an understanding of whether what we were doing would work with any teacher. And we wanted other teachers who saw how that pilot was going to not just say, oh, well, yeah, but that's that teacher who does that kind of stuff all the time. We wanted it to be a situation where we really had identified and were working with a true cross-section of our teachers, so that both we would get better information about what worked, what didn't, what needed to be tweaked in terms of our delivery of information to them and support for them, but then also to build the sense of capacity that other teachers had in terms of, yeah, I could do that too. They're doing it. I see that thing. I can do that in my classroom.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Adam. Julio, Brooke, what about that for, yeah, I imagine it's sort of similar enough, Julio, but yeah, what's your sense of that, I don't know if there's an ideal teacher candidate, but what were you looking for with your team?
For us, we have a structure at both the elementary and the middle school, high school, where you have teacher leaders. So we really are trying to leverage that structure. So at the elementary level, even though we don't, some of the teachers weren't originally part of the computer science for all work, because of their leadership positions, we really wanted to make sure that there was a point person per grade level, per department. So we enlisted their support, and people that are further along with work, we've set time aside for those teachers that are deeply entrenched and knowledgeable about computational thinking to provide professional development for those newer teacher leaders. So they have a support system in place. And that includes the administration as well. We have new administrators at the elementary level. So we've been bringing them on and setting time aside to build their capacity so that they can in turn support the larger faculty. The other thing about this work is, it wasn't until a few years ago that New York really put in place their computational standards, thinking standards. So really putting this forth towards to our staff that this is new and it's okay that you're uncomfortable with this, and having more of a growth mindset approach with this work, that we're going to get better in it over time, and that they're not expected to be experts. And that really allows people to take a deep breath and to engage with the work.
I'm glad you said that. There's two things there, Julio. You talked about administrators being brought in too, because that seems obvious enough, but oftentimes you just always go direct to the teachers, and the administrators are left out of it, which creates issues down the road. But then also giving breathing room when you build the teams to know that you're not supposed to come in with the answers and they're not going to be deliverable in 5 days. It's a matter of setting some time aside to think together with it. Brooke, Julio talked about some of the sort of structural support that already existed in North Salem, and it made me think about what you already had in place in Talladega with experts down the hall. So if you could talk maybe a minute about that. I imagine other districts have something like that. Even Adam, you had coaching in Iowa City too, but specifically around that, Brooke, how you leverage that kind of experts down the hall program as a way to get folks up and going with it?
Sure. So, in addition to just our technology coaches that we have in each building, we also have identified what we call expert down the hall. And this is a full-time classroom teacher who helps support others with technology integration. We identify those really just from recommendations from principals and the technology coaches, and then also myself and other district level administrators. We conduct walkthroughs in our school buildings once a month, and so we are able to see ourselves, these teachers who are leaders in their buildings, who are innovative, and they're not scared of a challenge. And those were the ones that we really wanted to be involved in our computational thinking pathways work, because just one thing about computational thinking and the competencies, some of the vocabulary can be really intimidating. And so, we counted on our teachers to really help communicate with their staff. These are not big, scary words. These are what these words mean, and this is what it looks like in the classroom. And, hearing that from a colleague who is full-time in the classroom, I think was a lot more impactful than even hearing it from our tech coaches or administrators or district staff, because these were people who were in the same role that they were in, and they were able to go in and observe some lessons and things of that nature. And, it also really helps build those leadership skills of those teacher leaders, who many of which we started this work 4 years ago. A lot of those teachers who were initially an expert down the hall have moved into technology coaching roles now. And I think that the reason for that is because they did such a good job in the classroom, helping move this work along.
That's great. I mean, Julio talked a bit there about this idea of kind of integrating and ramping up your own pedagogy. But Brooke, to your point there, I think there's also added benefits of creating coaching models and bringing teachers closer together to think together on this. There's a question in the chat. It's an excellent question. When I started doing some of my work in CS and CT way back in the day, the number of tools that were out there on the K-12 level probably could be counted on two hands. Nowadays, I don't know if there's enough hands out there to count all the tools and resources that are sitting on the education market. So to get a question out of this, and to what Stephanie's asking, what are the best resources, say books, websites, videos, for teachers to approach doing computational thinking in their own content areas? One of the things, and I'll just say this, is that as an organization, Digital Promise, and Infosys for that matter too, don't promote only select tools. We tend to be at Digital Promise and with our pathways, tools agnostic. We do offer what's out there, but how have your districts picked tools? Have you left that to individual teachers? Have you said to schools administrators, these are the tools we recommend? Kind of curious how that has played out and how that may have changed over the years in your own respective schools. That's anybody.
I can just speak to that a little bit. One thing that we did with our pathways, we actually embedded lesson plans and links to tools. And we made sure that if we linked a tool, it was one that either the district purchased or something that was free. Because there are so many out there, and really it depends on which competency, what content area you're working on. We didn't focus so much on the tool as we did the strategies, and then maybe trying to match a tool that would help them teach that particular lesson. So as far as a coding curriculum, we have access to things like Discovery Education, code.org, which is free. Nearpod has some coding with it, and we do subscribe to that. And it really just depends. That was one reason that I think the pathway has been so helpful for teachers, especially newer teachers. It was kind of a one-stop shop, so they could not only see, hey, this is the competency we want to work on, this is how it matches with a particular standard, and this is a tech tool that I can use to integrate this competency in my curriculum. And so that it was a lot of work, but that's why we had such a great team. It was a collaborative effort, and so that's kind of how we've organized it, and that's why it's a living document, because new tools come out every day, new lessons. And so we try to update that periodically so that we can add those new things to the pathway.
That's useful. Oh, go Adam, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in. I would echo everything that Brooke said, and their resource that's linked in the chat is fantastic, by the way. But also, in direct kind of how teachers could consider how CT fits into their content areas, I'd really want to give a shout out as well for the Digital Promise micro-credentialing platform. And I just stuck the link for that in the chat as well. That's something that we worked on. We also implemented PLTW along with a lot of the other tools through our media program that Brooke just talked about. But then we've also worked to provide teachers with the capacity to integrate CT directly into their existing curriculum and identify and leverage various tools to do that. And I'd really, encourage you to take a look at the CT micro credentials that are available within that platform as well, which was a starting point for us.
Yeah, and Adam, I know you're involved on the state level with Iowa too, but most states don't really have a way of certifying computer science or computational thinking. So, the microcredentials do offer that endorsement level, which I think can be very useful for a district to understand where their teachers are at. Julio, I'll stop editorializing. Back to you.
No problem. So I think for us, really, it was also our relationship with Digital Promise. And, we had professional developers from Digital Promise come to our district and work with our teachers for about a period of 2 years in developing a cohort and a deeper understanding of computational thinking. Also, definitely, we've, borrowed from Iowa City, we've borrowed from Talladega in terms of the resources that they have, so you really want to make sure that you network with districts that are further along in the work that you are, and learn from them, adapt their practices to your context. So that's been very helpful to us. Also in New York, for us, we belong to the New York State Association of Computer Science Technologies and Education, and belong to their professional development. So understanding how to implement the computer science standards and computational thinking standards, and sending representatives from our district to their workshops and having them come back and turnkey, that has been key to help us continue with the work.
That's great. That's great. Kind of stepping back, we kind of talked about this at the beginning, but I'll kind of hold back, especially as we're kind of on the second half now. A lot of talk about equity in education, and talks about inclusivity in education. How did, sometimes we feel like equity and inclusivity, these things just naturally pop up that we see inequities, and they're all very obvious to everyone. Sometimes that's the case, sometimes it's not the case. So all of you came into this pathway work with specific goals, and I'm wondering how you sort of centered yourself as a team around what equity challenges you addressed, and how you collectively came to that. Again, I say that with the question because I think sometimes people think it's very noticeable and that everybody knows what's inequitable and what's not inclusive, but oftentimes that's not as easy to sort of read as we sometimes assume. So how did those conversations go with your own teams and within your own districts? How did you sort of center on that and say, this is what we really want to push against, this is what we want to challenge?
For us, we really started by looking at data, and we started by looking at data as it related to our enrollments in secondary elective computer science courses, which is not a perfect indicator, but certainly, when we looked into that data and we saw wild disproportionality, both in terms of gender as well as in terms of a couple other factors, actually. Genders, we saw it in terms of ethnicity, and we saw it in terms of English language learner status. And so, we knew right there that we had an issue. And from there, we started to look closely at what does computer science and computational thinking education look like in our elementary schools at the time. And that started really solidifying what our why was in terms of developing a pathway where our top priority was making sure that it was something that we could deliver equitably to all of our students. And that also allowed us to kind of settle on a focus on K-8, because, the message we were getting back from our secondaries was that, students who weren't taking those courses, by and large, didn't feel either comfortable enrolling in them because they didn't feel like they had the requisite background, or it was a situation where they didn't even have an awareness that those courses and that subject area was something that was an option whatsoever.
That's really helpful.
We certainly had the same experience that Adam has had, and I want to say, in addition to what he said, it was really debunking the idea that computer science courses are something that only white male students can be proficient in or successful in. And really, it has been, in addition to building the pathway, reaching out to students, female students, English language learners, students with disabilities, and having the mindset as a school district that, this isn't about being a gatekeeper to these types of courses. This is really about building the capacity of students in all demographic groups, and realizing that it's a win when a student enrolls in a course like this, because it's opening doors and avenues for them that are going to improve their future. So rather than think of it from a deficit standpoint, think of it as an enrichment experience for our students, and really build their confidence that this is something that they can do.
Great. That's great.
I will just echo, what they said. And when we first started this work, I know that initially the goal was just to try to engage a certain grade band in this work or a certain subgroup. But, we felt really strongly in our district that we wanted all students to have these opportunities. And since we had such a large number of students who we identified as high poverty, low socioeconomic, we had 74% of those students. And being in a very rural district, we were 1-to-1. And so we really wanted to continue to try to provide those equitable opportunities for those students in particular, and female students, because we knew that was a very underrepresented group in our current offerings in our classes.
Yeah, and I appreciate all these responses. And I think, Adam pointed out on the secondary level, but Brooke and Julio alluded to it too. I mean, look at your numbers. You can notice things. I mean, and I guess that kind of goes against what I was saying, that you don't always notice, but there are some noticeable things, especially as you get to those upper grades and who's sitting in these classes, even when you do offer them. And I think a lot of districts have felt that in the past. I want to make a pitch here, and then I'm going to ask one more general question. First of all, thanks again to Julio, to Brooke, to Adam. These are people who you will see on these modules for Infosys with their team members talking about the process as it relates to the respective districts. And I think that's probably, I can speak, I think, for myself, and I think more broadly with our Digital Promise team. I think the thing that we felt we did most right with this Infosys course was going to our district leads and having them tell their stories on these respective modules. Today you heard about why you do this work, and inclusivity and equity, and that's in the modules. You heard about building a team and nourishing a team, and why you do this teamwork with all the other initiatives that schools are asked to do, and that's in these modules. And then finding your integration points, especially on the K-8. All of our leaders here talked about that as a process, and that's articulated within these. And finally, over the tail end of the modules, you're going to talk about actually implementation and then keeping the initiative going. So all of this is there. My final question is kind of a big old chestnut of a question that you hear all the time. Julio, Brooke, Adam, anything that I haven't asked that you'd like to mention or include when it comes to the work you've done here or the work you'll be doing in the coming years?
I think for us, it's that realization that this isn't work that, you're going to do in 1 to 2 years. This is a long-term commitment that's ongoing, and you really have to put your energy, resources, and commit to that, and realize that it's going to take time to build.
I'm glad you said that, Julio. Yeah, I think someone came up to me 2 weeks ago and says, "Is this something I can get knocked out in 2 months?" And no, it's not. It's work. Yeah, it's work.
Yeah, I would just say that, that is absolutely true. It takes time and kind of an ongoing commitment to implement this. I also think though about the value of it. I've had conversations with parents of elementary school students who are like beyond excited that their kids are being exposed to this stuff, and didn't expect that necessarily. I just actually earlier today had a conversation with somebody who works for a local cybersecurity company in our area, who was telling me that they recently hired one of our graduates who was a student who didn't go to college, but in his time here, for better or for worse from my perspective sometimes, but developed some fantastic skills in the realm of cybersecurity, and did so doing some of the work in our classes. Also caused a little trouble while he was here too, but that comes with the territory. So it's one of those things where I hear about those success stories. I hear about students who are able to do great things, whether that's, while they're still in school, whether it's beyond in terms of career. And that really speaks to why we put an emphasis on this work. It really shows up in terms of creating and opening up opportunities for our kids.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, this work is so important, and it's very timely. We're looking at just a huge rise in jobs in our country that are going to require students to be able to be tech savvy and be able to have those critical thinking skills. We are actually involved in a new effort for cybersecurity programming in our high schools. And I saw a statistic yesterday that said currently there are 1.5 million jobs in the United States, and in 3 years there will be 3 million. And we've got to prepare our kids for those types of opportunities, because the people currently out in the workforce right now, apparently there's not interest out there or the skill level needed. So I think in the next few years, it's just going to be critical that we provide those opportunities for our students.
Right. Yeah. And I think, Brooke, to your final point here, I mean, it's what Adam talked about earlier. I mean, school has stayed traditional, and there's reasons for school to stay traditional, but there's also plenty of room to sort of expand and make sure that the kids are walking out with the vocabulary and the sense of the competencies that these employers are looking for. So I appreciate that as sort of a final thought. If we could bring up the QR code, that would be great. And I want to just thank Adam and Julio and Brooke again. Adam Kurth of Iowa City, Julio Vazquez of North Salem School District in New York, and Brooke Morgan from Talladega Schools in Alabama. I also encourage listeners of this this webinar, to reach out to these school leaders. I know other district leaders have reached out to them when they began to do their pathways work, and they have made themselves available to kind of consult and give some guidance, because these folks know what they're talking about. Please scan this, take a look at the bit.ly, get over to the course, and most importantly, reach out to us at Digital Promise, because we are looking for some districts to pilot this work over the coming months. And we are also interested in kind of connecting with districts who want to do this work and see where we can support you going forward. We're at 152 on the West Coast, 452 on the East Coast, and 352 in the Midwest. We are going to close up for today. Thanks again to our panelists, and please be in touch with any questions. Thanks for everybody being on once again, and happy Veterans Day tomorrow. Take care.